Okay, it's a wild, crazy thing is that there's a lot of people in Canada who don't hate Trump, who love freedom, who believe in the God-given right to self-defense, but there are way too many Canadians who say only the government should have the guns, and then when they lock me in my frickin' house for 5.5 months under curfew during COVID, and I have to ask for permission to go to work at night, there's nothing I can do.
It's time to bring on Viva Frei. All right, Mr. Frei, and you are at 4 p.m. Eastern on the Rumble exclusive lineup. Can you see me, hear me, sir?
I can see and hear you. That picture's a little not outdated, but that's back when I was young and naive, running for federal office in NDG, Steve.
Oh, that's right. Yes, NDG. What a silly place.
Look, Canada's looking mighty silly in general now, and only looks like it's getting worse. But yeah, Notre Dame de NDG Westmount was the riding that I ran in for the federal election in 2021. And I thought things had gotten as crazy as they were going to get back in 2021.
Yeah.
4 years later, it's on steroids.
I know. So people who don't know Montreal, that's where I was raised. My mom is from there. And now, like many French Canadians, except I don't think you're wearing the Speedos and have an old hockey cut. You're in Florida. How do you like Florida compared to the cesspool that is Canada?
Every time I go back, it gets worse. It feels more and more like an insane asylum. I'm born and raised in Westmount, lived in NDG for a bit, lived in Quebec City, which is the capitale nationale, where I studied French for 4 years. Every time I go back to Montreal, it's like a different city. Homelessness is out of control. They have now their safe injection sites 2 kilometers from where I used to live.
Wow.
It's spiraling down the drain. But the boogeyman is Donald Trump, apparently.
Yes, exactly. And one thing, too, that's an interesting dynamic to me is, you're here on the Rumble lineup, right, exclusively. You're at 4 p.m. Eastern, where people can live stream. I think you follow Jeremy at the Quartering. And in Canada, we only had when I was there, we only had the CBC for news, which is, of course, basically propaganda. It's like it's like Pravda, but Canadian, so it seems nicer. It was entirely funded by the government. There were no other options. When people complain about the corporate media, and I have my problems, corporate media, I go, well, the alternative is government media? That's what we had in Canada, and look what you're doing right now. Wouldn't it have been nice when we were there to have some kind of an alternative?
Well, it's an amazing thing. Corporate media is government media in Canada. You've got CBC, which is the Canada Broadcasting Corporation or the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, Radio-Canada, which is Radio Canada, the French version. Then you've got CTV News, Global News, whatever else the local branches are. It's all government funded either directly or indirectly through government advertising, COVID subsidies, bailouts for print, advertising for digital. It's all government run, government owned, government controlled. And now we're entering into an election where the competition to the government is the one promising to defund the state-funded media. And so where do you think that's going to make media drive their narrative in terms of who should get elected in 2025?
Yeah, well, that's what happened with Trudeau, right? I think he promised either promised 100 or 150 million, and I think the NDP candidate promised like 50 or 100 million. There was a discrepancy of about 50 million, and they were like, we're going with Trudeau.
Well, the NDP, which is the New Democratic Party, is tanking. It looks like everyone that was voting for them is going to vote for the Liberals now. But yeah, it's a question of who can give the state-funded media more money compared to the Conservative Party, which wants to defund the CBC. And you see it in the way they control the narrative, suppress dissident voices in the upcoming election and the 2021 election. Yeah, it's insanity.
If people want to know what the left would do here in the United States, they would be at least Canada in a heartbeat if they had complete unfettered power, and it's terrifying. I know people can tune in at 4 p.m. for you. We do have to go to Rumble Premium here, but just let people know, what is Canada's end goal? What do you think, sort of vis-a-vis the United States in this trade war right now?
Well, I don't know. It looks like, if you go by the markets, it looks like Mark Carney, who now has a commanding lead in the markets and a ridiculous lead in the polls, but I don't trust the polls. It looks like they're going to try to make enemies out of America, ally with Europe, or get further into the dirty, corrupt bed with China and India. It looks like they are bringing themselves to be the enemy of the United States. And it starts as fun and games on a tariff war, but when it becomes actual issues for national security in terms of Chinese infiltration into Canadian government, Indian terrorist elements infiltrating Canadian government, fentanyl, terrorists crossing the border, well, then it goes from being a tariff war to being something much more serious as far as national security goes for the United States.
Yeah, and it also makes me question their judgment, because Canada has the United States to their south, right? They've been a horrible neighbor, but they decide to ally with Europe. Those guys are fags. Viva, and I know we have a bunch of people here who I'm sure a lot of them have questions. But let me ask you this, though, because you were in law in Canada. Is it just the judges, or did you have to wear the silly outfits and wigs?
No, they don't have the wigs anymore in Canada. They have the
right.
wigs still in the UK. We do have those stupid things. They're called frocks. They're
Yes.
like, I don't have my gown anymore. It's got like a black gown with a little white thing. And apparently there's a difference between the men's and the women's frock. And once upon a time, my father was wearing the female frock. And apparently the judge said, that's for the girls.
He didn't know?
It all looks so ridiculous. You wouldn't know the difference between the men's and the women's frock or the little frilly thing.
Yeah.
But no wigs.
Okay.
And I practiced for 13 years in Quebec. It's civil law. So you could do federal jurisdiction law, like bankruptcy, criminal if you wanted to. But I did civil in Quebec. And look, I didn't realize how corrupt it was back then. Back then, what I witnessed was sort of rubbing elbows and the wink, wink, nudge, nudge of the people who are connected in the legal community. And that's how things happen in court. But then, holy cows, politics, when you realize that's involved in every level of the legal system, you sort of understand how Canada turned into what it did during and after COVID.
Well, Canada is, and I know you're Canadian. I'm American, but I was raised, my mom's French Canadian, and I was raised there from 3 to 18. I mean, it's basically a subjugated people. It's not the same as the United States. We had a violent revolution, and in Canada, they didn't. And so when I lived there, they would always look down their noses and, oh, you Americans have guns. It's like, well, yeah, because we didn't want to be like you. We don't want to have the Queen and her money. And people may not like it, but that's a very different history, and that'll breed a very different people. And it's just surprising that Canada is multicultural and they accept all cultures. They're all equal, except for the United States, the one that actually won out in the end.
It's very interesting because I've come to appreciate this as well, that it is true. Canadians really do define themselves to some extent. And I'm being generalistic here, but
sure,
especially now, they define themselves as not being American, being, Americans are ignorant, brash, gun-toting, whatever, all of the stereotypes. And they're polite, subservient, deferential to authority. And I've never understood it, except now that I've come to understand the American zeitgeist. It makes sense that Americans fought the Brits, patriots, militias fought the most sophisticated army at the time for their very God-given freedom.
Yeah.
And Canadians, they were treated to Canada. Canadians said, no, we're happy being subjects to a king and a queen. And there is the spiritual difference between Canada and America, and it only sort of not exacerbates, but gets concentrated over time because you have a self-selecting sort of prophecy where people who decide to immigrate to Canada will view themselves as not being American. And the people who decide to leave Canada and go to America have more of an American spirit. Mm-hmm. And so you get the Jordan Petersons and you're not leaving exactly because you're half-half, but you get the Canadians who want this God-given risky freedom instead of this beautiful prison of government protection, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Let me ask you this, actually, because I was just thinking about this. How do I renounce my Canadian citizenship? I never did. I just left, fair. And I never renewed a passport. What's the process? Can I just say it on air 3 times? Like, how does it work?
No, do you have your old passport? I think if you burn that and rub the ashes over your naked body, that tends to do it.
Yes, my hairy American body.
Wow, this took a turn. Send me the video.
I don't know how to do it, but it's okay. It's a wild, crazy thing. Is that there's a lot of people in Canada who don't hate Trump, who love freedom, who believe in the God-given right to self-defense, but there are way too many Canadians who say, Only the government should have the guns. And then when they lock me in my frickin' house for 5.5 months under curfew during COVID, and I have to ask for permission to go to work at night, there's nothing I can do. I mean, 25% of the Canadian population works directly or indirectly for the government, unarmed, subservient, and they are beholden to and the subjects of not just the king and the queen, but the police force and the federal government.
Well, what's also to me is always so surprising is they go, oh, that's because you have violence. I mean, I was raised in Montreal. I think it's the city with the most mass shootings in the 20th century. Right? There was École Polytechnique, there was Concordia, and then I had friends at Dawson College when there was that shooting. This idea that they don't take place. Just Montreal has 3 notable ones.
I think the Polytechnique is the biggest in Canadian history. I think, was it Valerie Fabricant who took the gun I forget. I think that was Concordia. Yeah. And then there was the guy who shot, he killed one person in Dawson. But no, well, first of all, that was back then, Stephen. Like now, it's exponentially worse.
Right.
I lived in Lower Westmount. There was a guy got stabbed to death down the street. A drug dealer at Atwater, I don't know if you know where that is, got shot. There's shootings daily or frequently in Montreal. Toronto, forget about it. And Vancouver, forget about it. Like East Hastings back in the day used to be terrible. Now all of, a substantial part of Vancouver looks like East Hastings.
Wow.
Drugs, everything. It's people are under the impression that stricter gun laws make for a safer society. The stricter the gun laws got over the last 10 years, the worse gun violence has gotten in Canada under the Trudeau government.
Yeah,
and now they're going to re-elect the Liberals.
Well, I know, and that's because their identity is we're not American. And that brings me to, I know you referred to Carney, Mark Carney, the new Canadian leader, the Liberal. And for people, Americans don't understand, Trudeau stepped down. Carney is kind of temporary. There's going to be an election. You referred to him as a walking, talking Chinese fortune cookie, which I think is. Can you explain that to people who don't understand?
Every now and again, I make a tweet that even I think is pretty damn funny and insightful because it cuts two ways. Mark Carney, for those who don't know, yes, he was the anointed replacement prime minister. Justin Trudeau, after all of his scandals, a decade of destruction of Canada, he has 2 ethics breaches, Justin Trudeau, confirmed violations of the law. He had 3 accusations. He got away with the 3rd one. He groped a reporter in the year 2000, apologized for groping her because he didn't know how she felt about the groping. He's a misogynist. You got the blackface thing, which I care a little bit less about, but it's fun to make fun of him for.
It is fun.
After 10 years of scandalous corruption, he resigns because he lost the faith of his cabinet, prorogues Parliament, which means he suspends government, ends the session, and they can't do anything for 3 months, and then they hold their elections. They pull this guy, Mark Carney. Nobody ever knew who he was because he spent the better part of the last decade in Europe as the governor for the Bank of England, attending WEF and Davos meetings, Bilderberg meetings. Like literally, I went and pulled out a bunch of the videos of him giving Zoom calls for Davos with Bill Gates, attending Bilderberg meetings with Albert Bourla. He has 3 passports, this guy. I called him a walking, talking Chinese fortune cookie. I also called him a 3-passport carrying globalist whore because that's who he is.
I mean, his resume could be tattooed on Alex Jones' erection. Yeah.
I don't know how big Alex Jones's penis is because you got to have it. There's a lot in there for this guy.
I think there's some Zambian extension rings that could make it happen.
So Trudeau, he resigns. They hold robust national leadership races. They have Chrystia Freeland, who is beholden to Ukraine because of her family history. Mm-hmm. Karina Gould, who happens to be a Jewish woman who gave a standing ovation and smiled with that Nazi guy that they invited to Parliament. Yeah. And then you get Mark Carney. Mark Carney is Chrystia Freeland's son's godfather. So just what an incestuous relationship this is. It's a small incestuous club and we're not in it. But Mark Carney, it's like he's been advising Trudeau. People don't know this either for the last 5 years, specifically during COVID. So it's not just that he's nothing new to the Liberal Party. He was advising Trudeau for the last 5 years in his destruction of Canada. Now, why did I call him a Chinese fortune cookie? Because he gets out there. He's a nice old man. He talks with that smooth sort of CIA type, well-trained method of talking, nasally, like Kirby, like Comey, like all of these Fedi types, very smooth. And all he says are stupid platitudes you'd expect to find on a Chinese fortune cookie.
Yes.
And then the joke also is that we have sold out Canada to China, to globalist interests. He has advised Trudeau to implement crippling climate policy in Canada while he, through Brookfield Assets Management, is investing in dirty energy in, I want to say Venezuela, but I'm not exactly sure. It might be the UAE. He is, through Brookfield Asset Management, the company that he was the chair of, not the vice chair, because someone said he was the vice chair. He's like, no, I was the chair. He invests in dirty energy while advising Trudeau to cripple the Canadian economy for the so-called climate crisis, corrupt globalist whore, and I don't know what the hell the Conservatives are doing by not going hard on Mark Carney, instead just running a passive, weak, pussy candidate. I don't know what the hell they're doing, but maybe I go a little too hard.
No, I think you summarized it quite well. Let me ask you.
You know a lot.
Yes, yeah. And I don't know if you guys had questions, but I was going to ask you, what do you think the end game here is for Canada as it relates to the United States? How do you think this shakes out?
Well, it's an interesting thing. So when Trump came out and said, Prime Minister Carney, and the left orgasmically said, oh my goodness, he didn't even call him Governor Carney. That's the level of respect. Some people are hypothesizing that Trump says if Carney gets elected, Alberta will be easier to take. You already have in Alberta a strong separationist movement forming in Alberta. Some people are saying that. Others are people saying it's reverse psychology. If Trump sort of quasi endorses Carney, then the Liberals' heads are going to explode because now they like Trump. The end goal for Canada is what the current goal is. It's to allow it to become a vassal for China and India, and it has been. I mean, it's people don't understand this. Close to 1 in 5, it's either 18 to 20 some odd % of Canadian MPs are born outside of Canada. You've got Chinese infiltration in the Liberal Party, to a very lesser extent the Conservative Party, but they're not perfect. You've got a country where there are sections that speak neither English nor French and that claim that the European settlers need to go back to Europe. You have the Liberal Party creating wholesale destruction because that sort of creates the catastrophe that allows them to manage the crisis of their own creation. And that's how they get in power and stay in power. So as far as I'm concerned, it's the destruction of Canada and selling it out to foreign interests, just Chinese, not American. Canada doesn't want to become the 51st state. It wants to be like, I don't know how it works in China, like the next district of China, because that's basically what it's becoming in real time.
Yeah, that's a good point. And people, I'm sure you always get frustrated like I do when they go, well, very little fentanyl or very little crossings are taking place in the Canadian border. I go, yeah, that's because it's easier right now through Mexico. If we fix the southern border and Canada doesn't do anything about the northern border, it's so porous. I accidentally went from the U.S. to Canada like 3 times in a day and didn't even know it.
No, Stephen, I don't know if you've ever had Sam Cooper on, but you should, and we got to get Sam Cooper on Rogan. But I've had this Canadian journalist who documents this stuff. I had him on last week or the week before, and I'm going to have him on again tomorrow. But the question I asked him privately, just because for my own edification, is, okay, fine, only 1% of the fentanyl that they nab comes from the Canadian to the U.S. side. The question I have is, well, how much just goes straight down to Mexico because it's easier to smuggle up through the bigger Mexican border with the traffickers there? But the bottom line, we have fentanyl super labs in Canada. We're manufacturing not just more than can meet the demand of Canada, but more that could kill the entire North American continent. So where the hell is it going? It's going somewhere. Right. And so only 1% crosses that. There could be a number of reasons. They don't even check trains from what I understand.
Right.
But one thing that should terrify the living bejesus out of everybody, there's like 6 times more people on terror watch lists crossing into the States from Canada than from Mexico. So just put 2 and 2 together. It doesn't make sense. You all know about the incident of the Justin Trudeau's government training Chinese soldiers on Canadian soil for wintertime combat back in 2019.
I believe we covered that, on the show.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's like how much more do you need? And then you got all the Canadians saying, oh, this is a totally unjust tariff war. It's totally pretextual. Well, then fix the pretext, fix up your borders, and bust some of these fentanyl super labs, and then don't give Trump the pretext. Yeah. But the bottom line is Canada has become a national security threat to America, and that's not the type of neighbor you want to be, you polite Canadians.
No, those are strong words, but you know what? I do agree. I've said they're just bad neighbors. People go, our greatest ally. I'm like, no, it's not what you think. And of course, coming from Montreal, people know if you control the ports in Montreal, you actually control a large part of the drug trade in North America. People don't realize that, especially with the St. Lawrence and the locks there in Montreal, like, in the biker gangs, organized crime and the corruption with the police force. People can look into the biker gang wars of Montreal or of the province of Quebec and understand what's at play there. I do know we do have to go back to some of the tariff stuff with Lane, because now we're going to go back to Asia. He likes the ladies. People here on Rumble, when can they watch you? Where can they watch you, Viva?
4:00 is my slot in the Rumble lineup daily, and Sunday night with Robert Barnes, Viva and Barnes Law for the People. That's like the big weekly show. We go over everything. And vivabarneslaw.locals.com for an amazing locals community. That's about it. And if you Google Viva Frei, you'll find a lot of fun stuff on the internet.
Yes, you'll also find some horrifying pornography, but that's not your fault. Viva Frei, thank you for being here, sir. We'll see you soon.
My pleasure.
Keep watching. Click. Keep watching. Click. Keep watching. Click the keep watching. Click. Keep watching. Click. Keep watching.